Hello, everybody, and welcome to the High Velocity Service Management webinar series. This is episode 2, High Velocity IT and Chaos Monkeys, by far my favorite title for a webinar. So in this episode, we're going to have a look at how the industry is fundamentally changing its approach to IT operations and how Jira Service Manager can help support this digital transformation. The topics we're going to cover today are fast failure and chaos engineering, ITSM, high velocity IT and DevOps, and supporting high velocity IT with Jira Service Management. So Gary, let's start off with the question on everybody's lips before we start. What are chaos monkeys?
Well, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer because chaos monkeys are really just a concept and an engineering practice that illustrates high velocity IT and a high velocity IT culture. So we'll come to that a bit later.
Okay, then I'm on the edge of my seat, ready to hear about that. Okay, so talk to us a little bit then. What does high velocity IT culture look like? If you could help us with that, please.
So the term high velocity IT is a term that's used by Ittel and Atlassian, and it really covers the concept of bringing together a lot of best practice that's been built up over the last sort of 10, 15 years around delivering IT operations and digital products within a business. The key things or the key characteristics really of an organization that is exhibiting a really strong high velocity IT culture is having very lean working practices, making use of agile as part of software engineering and software engineering practices, so Scrum, that kind of thing. Having resilient operations, that is the shifting the emphasis from robustness, where historically businesses would make sure their infrastructure and their services would not fail, to actually working on the basis that things will fail and what do we do to recover it as quickly as possible. It's almost building into the solution the fact that the system will fail at some point, and so we want it to recover as quickly as possible. And there's some core principles around that. It's this idea that your resilience is based on the availability of your service or your product, how well it performs, and how secure it is. And then finally, looking at things like continuous improvement. So how can we be better at what we do, whether it's our working practices through lean, whether it's software development and software engineering through agile practices, or whether it's through those resilient operations.
So, okay, so deeper diving into this, how are products and services successfully developed in high velocity IT cultures?
Well, there's this concept of a digital product lifecycle. And the idea is that you have certain techniques and methods that you use in order to develop your digital products, whether you're a piece of software or service or something else that you provide, and that you want to use these techniques I've mentioned, like lean and agile and resilient operations, throughout that entire digital life cycle. So just thinking in terms of, like, if you were looking to start, you're looking to create new products or new services, then things like understanding how valuable those products will be to your customers. So things like prioritized backlogs in Jira, minimal viable products, things like A/B testing, where you kind of release a product, get some feedback and understand whether it's, something that the market is going to respond to. You might use fast or rapid development techniques, the things like agile, DevOps, infrastructure as code, everything that's going to cut out any of those barriers and silos that get in the way from having products go from, inception through to actually being available to your customers. Those resilient operations, which I've been talking about, things like chat ops, co-creation of value, which is basically where, you're providing a service to your customers, but your customers are providing you feedback, and you can use that feedback to make your products better. And also providing assurance around, security, compliance, DevSecOps, making sure there's no vulnerabilities. But it's in those resilient operations really where a lot of changes have happened, particularly in recent years. And that's where the concept of chaos engineering or chaos monkeys comes in, which I know you're excited to learn about. So the whole idea is that historically, when you were building IT systems and making them robust, you would spend months and weeks testing to make sure they would perform to an acceptable criteria, and that the mean time to failure, so how often the system would fail, was as long as possible. And the problem with that is it's very difficult to predict actually what's going to happen. And no matter how good your testing regime, you never really removed any of the risk involved of, a major outage or a performance drain or an attack of some kind. So the idea of chaos engineering and the term chaos monkeys is that you don't predefine those tests. You use a chaotic system to actually hammer and provide turbulence to your system so you can understand how stable or how it's going to respond when bad things happen. And in fact, chaos monkeys were invented by Netflix to test its IT infrastructure. And the way it works basically is the chaos monkeys are these kind of algorithms and systems that run in the background, and they constantly try to break the Netflix environment. They will overload it with data. They will switch things off, turn things on, break this, turn that off, switch that switch off. And the idea is that through doing that kind of testing, even in a production environment, you're able to then build your IT operations in a way that they'll respond immediately. So if one of the servers goes down, then another one immediately pops up in its place and seamlessly takes over. So from the consumer's point of view, they see no real impact. But behind the scenes, you are making your system more and more resilient because these chaos monkeys are constantly trying to find the holes or weaknesses in your system. It was described by one of the authors of the original report as imagining a monkey entering a data center where you've got farms of servers that hold critical functions, and the monkey just randomly rips out cables, destroys devices, breaks things, chucks water on stuff. And the challenge really is for IT managers and people who are engineering new systems to build their system in such a way that it can cope with the chaos. And so you build more resilience into your product. Now, there's a thing called the Simian Army, which is actually the software you can use if you want to use the Chaos Monkeys. I think it's open source. There are commercial software as well, like Gremlins, things like that. There are other techniques as well which go alongside this, things like chat ops, so using Slack and Teams to quickly collaborate when there is a problem. So if your system starts to fail, everyone can then rush together and swarm on it to understand what the problem is. You can even these days, there's the concept of AI ops, which I know something that Atlassian is investing a lot of money in, which is this idea that you use machine learning and AI to look at the output of your monitoring tools that are monitoring your services. And when potentially you're using a Simian Army to test it, the AI can work out what's going on before a human can. It can see the trends. It can understand, okay, these things are starting to happen. This is likely to lead to this event. And so let's actually, recover much sooner. So the whole concept really is changing that way of thinking. It's shifting left. It's about not spending months building something which is robust, building a castle. It's about understanding that the building you have is likely to come under attack and how quickly you can recover when it does.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, it's really fascinating, and what a change in thinking, really. And we definitely see that in our customers and people we speak to. And this, obviously, people who are certainly producing SaaS-based products. We all know that when we use anything SaaS-based, we want it consumer grade, which means it's just always up. Think about the amount of times you've not been able to access Netflix, for example. It's beyond minimal, isn't it? I don't think.
Yeah.
Probably once, and that was probably a problem with my Sky rather than Netflix. And then it's bringing those theories down. I think the one that really jumps out at me when you're discussing it is that idea of chat ops, that idea of swarming, and that's a really practical thing that people can take away from today without jumping all the way to have the same type of infrastructure, say, as a Netflix. That sort of more real world, I suppose, or day-to-day stuff. Thanks for that. That's brilliant. And what a mad image it creates in your mind of
these monkeys running around. Yeah,
monkeys running around data centers, and I'm sure they would pull out every wire. Okay, let's sort of drill down again. So how do Atlassian themselves support high velocity IT practices and techniques?
So Atlassian actually put high velocity IT at the center of their strategy with their entire product portfolio, in fact. And in fact, I think they actually embrace this in terms of the SaaS service they provide as well. But if you think about the portfolio of products that Atlassian have got, and we've talked a bit about, for example, lean and lean ways of working. Well, things like Jira Work Management and Trello are effectively designed to support that by providing Kanban, and which is a lean technique, allows you to understand, what your demand is, and managing that demand, and putting in place things like katas, which are kind of disciplines that you follow. You've got Jira Software, which has been around for many years and is really the market leader in providing agile software development support and agile software development and project management through using Scrum and sprints and leading into DevOps. You've got things like Bitbucket and Bitbucket pipelines, which fully support DevOps pipelines, infrastructure as code, all those things that support that kind of fast development that I was talking about. And then through continuous improvement, you've got things like Confluence, which can allow you to have, shared knowledge, collaboration, manage that continuous improvement program. And then at the heart of that, really, in supporting high velocity IT, is Jira Service Management, which is powered by Opsgenie. And so through Jira Service Management, you have the ability to receive those monitoring alerts. So when the chaos monkeys are doing their thing and the monitoring tools are actually alerting your system to say it's under attack from some way or something is failing, then Opsgenie and Jira Service Management can bring all that information together to allow people to collaborate on resolving that particular incident through using things like chat ops in Slack and Teams as well. It's all fully integrated, pretty much out of the box. It's just a case of plugging your monitoring tools in and away you go. And really facilitating that concept of having fast failure, fast recovery. So, as soon as something fails, the product knows it's failed, tickets can be raised, people on call can be alerted, and you can restore the service as rapidly as possible. So it's really at the heart of everything they do. Atlassian have actually written a white paper on high velocity IT with JSM. It's worth a read and a download. Just explains how it's at the heart, really, of everything they're doing.
Yeah, and I think, again, one of the advantages that Atlassian have had with this SaaS platform they've got is because it's so new, they've been able to build it for today, haven't they? Rather than dealing with legacy, which a lot of the competitors, have that weight around their neck, don't they?
They do. I mean, I see it a lot in terms of concepts like swarming, which is something we'll probably cover in a future webinar. But swarming is this idea you get everyone together when there's a problem to try to quickly resolve it. The Atlassian products, particularly Jira Service Management, is kind of designed out of the box to encourage swarming. It uses concepts like dynamic queues and integrations with Slack and Teams so that happens instantly. When I look at legacy ITSM tools, they kind of counter that. They try to establish silos. You have the concept of things like resolver groups, which almost enforces that only those people can deal with it. When in actual fact, if you've got a really serious problem, you want everyone, you want all eyes on it, because it might not be that team that can fix it. It might be somebody else. And if everyone is having a look at it, if you've got more eyes on it, the quicker it is that you're likely to resolve it. And those concepts of swarming and rapid recovery, rapid restoration of service are kind of baked into the thinking within the Atlassian products, but they're not necessarily in some of the competitor products.
Yeah, and what a good takeaway. So that high velocity IT white paper is absolutely worth the read, because this is a fundamental shift in the way of thinking. So we definitely recommend that, and we'll include the link for anyone watching this. We'll send that to you. Right, so before we move to the Q&A, I just want to say, so we haven't talked in depth about managing incidents and change yet in high velocity IT, and that's what we're going to do on the next webinar. So join us for there. But now we're going to move to the Q&A, and thanks for your time at the moment, Gary.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, right, let's jump into the Q&A. We've got a couple of questions here. If you've got any questions yourselves, please put them in the chat on whichever platform you're watching on. So number one, Gary, is how easy is the setup in Jira Service Management to support chaos engineering methods?
It's a lot easier than you might think, because essentially the pre-built templates, if you set up a Jira Service Management project using the ITSM template, and you're on, in fact, standard or premium or enterprise, actually, everything is kind of configured for you. So the incident management side of it is all there. The integration with Opsgenie is built in. And all you've got to really do is set up your team and service in Opsgenie, and then just plug in the integrations you've got to the monitoring tools for the systems that the chaos engineering testing is basically happening on. Because basically you want the monitoring tools you're using, Datadog or Zabbix or whatever it is you're using, you want them to monitor that production environment or that staging environment anyway when it's live. And when you're doing a case engineering and your case engineering testing, what you want to do is validate that and receive all the alerts as things get broken from that platform. And over time, what you'll then do is use that alert information to help you build a far more resilient system. So design it so that it recovers quickly, and identify what might lead you to detect that something is going to go wrong. You can start looking at the trends of the alerts that are generated. But yeah, just those three things really. Set up the project within Opsgenie, create a team, add a service, and then add those integrations with Zabbix and Datadog. And there's over 200 integrations Opsgenie connects to in terms of monitoring tools, and they're normally really easy to set up. They have step-by-step instructions. Normally it's just a case of pointing a URL at something and clicking a few buttons and you're done.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And we'd love to hear any stories of anyone doing that level of practice, because it's obviously an exceptionally modern way of going about things.
Yeah, I've only seen it with one client in the last 3 or 4 years, but when I did see it, it was really impressive, and it was part of an entire DevOps pipeline. And they had blue-green environments basically. So they basically had 2 lives which they would switch between, and they did the chaos engineering testing against both. So it was fascinating.
What industry were they in, out of interest?
Right, I've got to be careful not to give them away. They are in financial services.
Okay, keep it more broad. Yeah. And do you think this approach is actually better suited to certain verticals, or is it a maturity thing or complexity thing?
I do. I think it's for, we talked about Netflix obviously being a pioneer of this. It's really, if you've got a site or an internet facing service that has a lot of volume and is mission critical, then these techniques can, certainly the high velocity techniques can really help. And obviously Jira can easily plug into that and provide you with the reporting, tracking and analysis mechanisms around that. So yeah, obviously financial services heavily governed. If you're running websites for financial products, you need them to be absolutely stable. I would think trading platforms, medical appliance, medical uses, things like that. But in theory, you can use it for anything. If you've just got a small business where you're providing, I don't know, so holiday bookings or something like that, then you want your website to be stable and up. So these techniques can be used on anything.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Gary. Right, I'm just going to go to another question we have. Bear with me. So how common is incident swarming, and how easy have teams found adopting it versus assigning groups?
So we'll probably cover this more in the next session. So it's a good sort of teaser into that, really. But I mentioned incident swarming a bit earlier, and it's a question that comes up a lot, because part of the whole concept, one of the concepts of high velocity IT, is that when you do have an instance, when something goes wrong, that you want to remove any delay whatsoever in recovering that incident. And one of the more modern ways of doing that is to swarm. And what swarming basically means is you get everyone to look at it simultaneously in the hope that someone will spot immediately what the problem is. And this is the antithesis of the way things used to be done. And I know this from spending 10 years working in the banking industry myself, where you would get an incident raised, it will be assigned to a certain person to look at or a certain team to look at. They would look at it and go, well, it's nothing to do with us. And then they would pass it back, and then it would be assigned to another team, and they would look at it and go, well, it's nothing to do with us. And they would pass. And so all you're doing is building delay into the recovery of the incident, because you're bouncing it around until it lands with the right team. And it's sometimes known as the hot potato, or the holy hand grenade is another one I've heard. The whole idea of swarming is that you avoid that, and you say, okay, if this incident comes in, I want everyone from every one of those teams to look at it, and then whoever spots what they think is the root cause first, they own the incident, and then they track it through to closure, and you keep everyone communicating and in the loop on that incident. So it is a cultural change. It's a bit like going from waterfall to agile within a business, because you're really sort of throwing away 30 years of orthodoxy to say the way you've been doing it all this time is counterproductive. And what you really want to do is, if there's a problem, everyone on it straight away. Now, where I've seen it work successfully is where it's been applied primarily just for high priority instance. So if you've got a major incident, then you would swarm it. You wouldn't swarm every incident, because that would just be overkill and too much. But you have to have the right tools to do it. So you mentioned chat ops. So things like Slack and MS Teams, they're real enablers for this type of working, because, you know, if you have a major incident, you get everyone in a Slack room, boom, you know, you can quickly, you know, get all the logs going in there, get all the messages going in there, and hopefully someone will spot very quickly what the issue is, and then they will then hopefully get it resolved much quicker. That's the concept. But it's not easy, because it's cultural change, and cultural change is much more difficult than digital or technology change.
Yes,
but it does work.
It does. And that is a good lead into episode 3, which will be coming out in a few weeks, again, live. But this episode 3 will really go into some of the detail around that and about how you can adopt that in your business. It is, again, a particularly modern way of solving problems. And although it's cultural, and that means people, and like Gary was saying, that is more challenging, the actual impact on your business will be immediate. That's one of the beautiful things about it. So definitely tune in for that. Let me see if there's any more questions. Bear with me 1 minute. Any more? No. Okay, so that's it for questions. So thank you very much for joining us today. We'll release the video, including that we will also reference the High Velocity IT white paper, which Atlassian themselves have written. Highly recommended, really touches on a number of the things Gary's been speaking about over the last 2 webinars and what we'll be discussing next time as well. But until next time, thank you very much.
Just quickly, is it worth mentioning the High Velocity IT event in December?
It definitely is. Yes. So so Atlassian, again, on this vein, as you've seen, Atlassian themselves are really heavily investing in service management as a whole, be it IT or be it enterprise service management. And for our European customers or any US customers who want to come over to London, there's a 1-day event being hosted at the O2, which is obviously the very large area there in London, in the Docklands. And the date of that event, I'm just going to triple check so I get it right, is Thursday, the 8th of December. So if you were to Google, I'm just going to give you the name, Atlassian High Velocity ITSM London, you will see the sign up to the event. Places are limited, although it's a larger event, so get your tickets now. I believe it's free to attend. I've also been told there's meant to be somebody quite glamorous performing at the evening party, so we'll see what that, we'll see what that is. But in terms of this focus, this is what we wanted to cover in this webinar series that Gary and I have done, is to really expose this functionality that's available, particularly to Atlassian customers or customers looking to join the ecosystem. So check that out. We'll be there. We'll also be there with our sister company, our parent company, Ethicode. So we're going to be there in force. And Gary and myself will be there personally. So we'd love to speak to you at that event. Good catch, Gary. Right. Until next time, we look forward to seeing you on episode 3. Bye for now.